And so he's starting these space missions, man. You know, it's like those astronauts, man. Those astronauts are like, look at the planet. What are we gonna do about that? This is what if those people can't work together and build better families, then we're not gonna get more intelligent children to grow up to make more intelligent families. So what are we gonna do about that, It's like we gotta repair the Earth. How are we gonna launch that Mars mission? And somebody says, man, how do we brighten up their lives, man, and give them new hope? It's like, the lights are coming on in the parking lot, man. Just right when I said that, it's like, man, there's a God above. Look how. Then there's another one. Man, all the lights are coming on. It's like, man, we're waking up people all across the United States. This is, man, they got so much domestic violence stuff. It's like, man, you guys have any domestic violence problems? It's like, man, did you go to the chapel? Did you go to the church? No? I tell you what, did you go to the courthouse? It's like, they build a hotel. And they're like, hey, we got a courthouse, And then we got a courtyard. Now, if you're out there in the yard acting like animals, then maybe you go visit on a mission. You go, hey, stop at the courtyard instead of the court, It's like, what do you mean? Well, we're sending that couple on a mission. He's like, what's a mission? It's like, man, they go a mission from God. They watch all those funny movies that they never got the comedy, It's like, they got the comedy and they started laughing and thought it was a big joke. And I was like, it's not a big joke, man. So it's like, man, we got to build something. I got JSO. It's like, what's that, man? It's like Jesus' space operators, man. They thought J stood for Jacksonville. I was like, no, Jesus' space operation, man. It's like, if we build better spaces out there and across the country, then we got a lot more room for better families. It's like, but we got to have better families with more intelligent minds. We got to have brains for the operation, man. And they said, what does Brevard County have to do with Jacksonville? Man, I had to go to a place and I wrote on a wall. They're like, why is that guy writing on a wall? I says, man, if they couldn't read the writing on all those walls and advertisement signs, then maybe I'll write it on a wall. And I says, man, Brevard and Jacksonville. It's like, what do you mean? Well, we got a Jacksonville space operation. Why do you think they call it JSO? Those people are riding around, man. It's like, man, they're driving around trying to help people. It's like, man, the courthouses are overflowing. The jails are overflowing. It's just like there's no more places to put these people. It's like, well, we can't even put them out there in the desert. There's not enough trees and forests and houses. And how are we going to feed those people? I talked to the judge, and the judge is like, hey, maybe we'll send those other people the bill for the food. It's like, a bill for the food? Well, how do you collect on something they don't have? And it's like, well, if we get them over to a courtyard, then maybe they'll start to understand. This is a courtyard. It's more than a courthouse. It's like, man, did you watch Back to the Future? I have Back to the Future, man. It says we're going to repair the clock tower. It goes, what's the clock tower? It's like, well, most people don't pay attention to science. How do I get them interested in science? It says the clock tower, man. The atomic clock. It's like atomic clock. As soon as you say that, people are like, man, their brains are going to explode and they're dropping bombs on each other. I'm like, no, they're not, man. We're talking about the atomic clock. The atmosphere. The atmosphere is what protects the earth, and we got to do that through trees and climate control. Climate control? Yeah. The control, If you have enough control of mind, then you have enough control to sit in a seat in the classroom and say, like, hey, man, you got that domestic violence class? It's like, man, it keeps setting me up. I was like, why do I got to keep going and doing these domestic violence classes? And it's like, man, I'm a genius, don't you know? And it's like, man, what am I supposed to do? It says, maybe that's why we keep having to do all those classes, man. We got to find an alternative way of solving these problems, because we give them all the classes in the world. It's like my dad growing up saying, hey, we bought them books and we sent them to school and it's still not working. So I says, I'll tell you what, we'll get creative with it, man. That's some kind of crazy Christian church. It says, man, if I have children and I raise a proper family and they mix with those other children and they raise proper families, it's like making carbon copies for God, man, like a Christian church. And it says, man, these people playing football, man. It's like, what's this fantasy football stuff? I didn't know, man. It's like everybody play fantasy football. Fantasy football. You know what the problem is? They're playing fantasy football. Well, that football of particles up there in the atmosphere, it's like little microscopic particles, man. Each microscopic particle is a football being tossed around to protect the earth. You can't see it, and then the minister goes, you mean faith for things unseen? That's exactly what we're talking about. I says, man, and how are we going to play football? I said, the problem was, they said, fantasy football. Life is not a fantasy, man. It's something you build together, and then you graduate into life, and you go, man, That's what Minister Kirk was talking about all of his life. He says, yeah, man, every time I go, I keep telling everybody, you got so much game. He's like, you got game, you got game, you got so much game. It says, one of these days, these people are going to learn to graduate out of the game and into life. This is how do we do that? The problem is they keep saying fantasy football. It says, didn't you think about virtual football? I'll kick off a virtual football game. Valentine's Day. They're like, man, why do we have Valentine's Day one day out of the year? Because that's your game day. That's the one day you get a game plan and you go, man, this is my game plan and I'm going to graduate from it one day into life and it's going to be like my life plan. And they go, man, everybody is down there. They said, why is those preachers doing so much for that one minister? He says, because that's not the preacher, that's the minister going out there in the field to administrate. And if we don't support our men in the field, man, what are we going to do? It's like New Life Church, man. We're going to bring new life to Jacksonville, but not the church, the people. And that's why we built so many other churches with different names. And it says, man, looking around all these churches, all these different names, it's like, didn't God name you a name? Didn't God name you a name? And what's in your name? What's in your family? What are you building? And he says, man. So, he says, man, how can I get a little heaven on earth? He says, man, you know, they started getting these little messages over at the Jaguar football game. I says, you guys ever heard of the Navy Jags? You know, Navy Jags, man. Yeah. That's like Jesus' angel guy squad, man, the Jags. So it says, man, we got people out there acting like animals, man. This is, man, let's make a football team, you know. We're going to put them on the field. And they're going to tackle people, man, like animals and stuff. But they're not going to be animals. They're going to have courtesy and respect when they do it. And it's going to be about sportsmanship. It says, man, the Jaguars, man. And it says, man, I'm looking for the Naval Air Station, man. I'm like, hey, did they build that museum? Did they build that museum? It says, no, man. We don't need a museum, man. You know, don't you see Disney World? We need an event center, man. And then one of the guys says, well, we'll make all of Jacksonville like a Naval Air Station. You mean like a Naval Angel Squad? I says, yeah, man, that's why we got the Jaguars. It says, man, they need a new football coach. I says, no, they're not. They got a great football coach. What they needed is a new virtual football coach. And they go, man, what are you talking about? You know? You know, if I use that acronym, I would say a virtual football coach is like Visions for Christ. Visions for wisdom, man, we got it in so many places. Like, hey, can you guys see straight? No, or maybe you need glasses. You know, they sober up, they put the glasses on, like, I can't see nothing. It's like, okay, maybe it's nothing wrong with your vision, there's something wrong with their minds. It's just, well, maybe we get like this beam me up Scotty stuff, man. It's like, hey, did you guys see that Star Trek system? It's like, man, we want to build stars for the future, man. And you're like, man, we got stars on TV, we got stars in the field, and then we got stars on a baseball field, we got stars on ice, you know? It's like, man, if the world becomes cold, they look to the United States and it says, man, the whole place is not frozen. We got stars on ice, you know? It's like, what do you mean? Well, I got to go to that building, you know? You know, it's so warm over here, you know, we got to put an ice rink inside of a building. It's like, man, an ice rink inside of a building? And they go, why would we put an ice rink inside of the building? We just go out to the lake up there up north somewhere. And maybe we'll find one down south too, you know? And then we'll skate across that ice and it says, man, that's stars on ice. And they go, what's ice agents, man? We go, stars on ice, man. You know, they go, man, you mean that woman's out there on the ice skating around all elegantly, you know, like a lady? Says, man, well, if you could take someone from nowhere in the middle of nowhere that doesn't know much about anything and at least get them out there on the ice skating and saying, look, we're trying to be ladies. And maybe they find a nice gentleman to settle down and they get into a school or a church or a chapel, and then they go out into the world and they build something great. That president goes out there in the field and he goes, man, I don't even know what the field. The field is like in the building and everything. It's even inside the White House. The White House is supposed to have prestige and family values. He goes out there and he's like, man, I don't know what's going on. It looks like George Washington in like the end times. He says, man, I can't have the end times. It's got to be like a new beginning. So he goes, I'll tell you what, it's going to be great. It's going to be so great. I'm like, man, what do you mean? He says, man, everything's so messed up, I don't know what we do. It's like we're playing football for God. And it's like, man, it's going to be great, so great. I don't even know how great it's going to be, but I know that God promised something, and it's going to be great. It's going to be so great. And by the time we get there, it's going to blow our minds. We're going to be like, man, I can't believe what's going on. Next thing you know, you got churches and stuff being built everywhere. And they go, what does a church do for a community? And it says, it's not the building, it's the community. So how much community can I get in that building to build a community to do more than a building? That's how you play football.